Good morning, listeners. How are you? I'm sorry, I got my microphone way off there. How are you today? Let me turn this music off. You can probably hear it in the background. A little. This is Jim the Keys Bartender. I'm not going to tell you where I'm coming from because I think you know I'm back home in the Keys. And it was beautiful weather visiting up in Washington, D.C., Dover, and then Baltimore, Towson area. So I was visiting, I was taking care of I was helping Abby and Sky take care of some of their dual citizenship requirements in Washington. Yeah, you've heard some of the interesting things that happened up there. We traveled really, what would you call it, unplanned. The biggest planning I did was the tickets. I bought the plane tickets. And I'm not going to go to the people that understand how to do the online, when you check in, how you pick your seats. And I was using Spirit. And, a lot of people complain about these budget airlines, but they do fit or fill a need that people have for low-cost travel. Now, if you're someone that travels like one of those people that went on the Titanic in first class where they got trucks and truckloads of luggage, you might as well go first class on United Arab Emirates and pay like $4,000 because you're going to pay a shitload of money for luggage. And they charge you for carry-on. Now that's the tricky part. They call it personal item versus carry-on. Personal item they consider as a handbag, a briefcase, a backpack. Now there's big camper backpacks that people used to bring on. Now they consider that carry-on up to a certain size. And then there's a size you can, out from that you can check. So we ended up with, because I'm traveling with girls, and they did pretty good. They did really good with we were only up there for, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And you're pretty much wearing the clothes you're going to wear. You are wearing the clothes you're going to wear on Monday. So you don't really need Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and we traveled back on Thursday. So I didn't really reserve a car until the day before. And the hotels, I booked them right when I needed them. And it worked out pretty good. Now, that doesn't necessarily work out your best. You don't want to be on the fly all the time if you're not flexible where you can go. And we were flexible. So if it was really busy in Washington, D.C., we could have went to Dover, Delaware, and stayed there an extra night. But what we did was we stayed overnight in Washington, D.C. the first night. Got a pretty good deal at a nice hotel. And then we went on to Dover. And the interesting thing down there even with the COVID restrictions, some places required masks, some places didn't so much. The travel, it wasn't that busy. We were fortunate not to be in a place where there's big events going on at the time. But Washington, D.C. there's always something going on. There's a lot of visitors to Washington, D.C. And it was beautiful. The weather was beautiful. It's very interesting when you think about how your body biologically senses the change in the weather. And it's waking up in the morning and having it around a little below 50 degrees. That's kind of a shock. It's kind of a shock. You never really get too warm up there. I mean, you could dress a little too warm if you're walking around Washington, D.C. We walked a lot. Dover, not so much. Not so much in Towson. But all in all, the short-term planning worked out pretty good. It could have been disastrous. It's probably best to leave that when you don't have your family, but it worked out for us here. And we didn't have, and plus my daughter's 15 now, so I don't have to worry about dragging along a little one, waiting to, crash. So we had a wonderful time, and like I said, that budget airline thing, that worked out like a song. I mean, what do you mean like a song? I'm talking to myself now. It just was, booking was easy, boarding was easy, the flight was easy. The only thing coming back into Miami, there was a delay at the gate because it got there early. So you always hear these horror stories, and in the news you hear about disruptions on the flight and things like that. I don't know what it would be like for a flight attendant right now. I can only ascertain from my experience in the restaurant business what it's like. And that's where I was able to commiserate with the servers we had when we were dining. In Washington, D.C., we were at a small chain restaurant called North Italia, and they did a good job. There was long waits in between. And, it didn't seem like it was all that busy, but being in the restaurant business, I understand. That doesn't mean they're fully staffed. Just because they're not all that busy, they could be staffed for less people than that are in there. And we went to several places like that where people seem to be running around more. Because you don't know what's going on in the kitchen. Because at the back of the house, it's really having a hard time getting people to staff up at restaurants. When I say back of the house, that means your line cooks, your chefs, your dishwashers and bussers and things like that. But the front of the house is understaffed also, but you can pretty much see that. You can tell that. So we went to a couple small places, some privately owned one. We went to one in Towson called Bread and Circuses, or Circus and Breads. I'm not sure. Good restaurant, nice restaurant in Towson. It was staffed fine. You had to wait a little there, but the food was excellent. Same thing, we went to an Applebee's. Yeah, in Dover. An Applebee's, just like these big chains, you could go to a really well-run Applebee's or a poorly run one. And this one seemed to be well-run. The people there seemed to be squared away. It was really nice. It was on DuPont Highway in Dover, Delaware. And we didn't wait that long. And I commiserated with that person. And then later on in the night, we went to a steakhouse, Longhorn Steakhouse. And that was... We showed up there, and there was only like 5-6 tables in the whole restaurant. And when we showed up with... How many of us? There were 5 of us. And they gave us a 10-minute wait, even though there were a lot of tables. Now, this is where people have problems at restaurants. And I have to explain it to the people have problems. Restaurants are doing perfectly fine. They handled this perfectly. They had a certain amount of staff in the kitchen and a certain amount of staff on the floor. And they were seating people according to when they could service them. And when they say service them, they take their orders and be able to get their order in a prompt time. Because you could seat a whole bunch of people. You could seat the whole restaurant. But when someone's seated at a table, they're expecting to be, in their head, they're expected to be someone to come up and say hello to them. They don't care. They don't really care. They don't think about that the kitchen is only at 50% and the floor is only at 50%. They don't want to hear that. They're just hungry. I'm going to, take my money. Well, we had a wonderful visit at the Longhorn. There was this guy there, Morgan was his name. The server Morgan. And it was really interesting. Out of the 4 or 5 restaurants we went to, because we had those breakfasts in the morning that were included with your stay. So we were only out, there were 3 days, and the first day we were really only out 1 time, and the second one 2 times. I think lunch, and we did lunch and dinner, and the 2 of them were fast food places. right? And out of those, all of the upper, let's say Applebee's on up. I know Applebee's isn't fast food, but it's not exactly fine dining either. All those places seem to have more stress. And it seemed to be, and the same thing, one day we did go to a Denny's, and they were busy at Denny's too. They had a hard time keeping up. There was only 2 people on the floor at around, God, what was it? 9:30 when we arrived. So I commiserated with the people at North Italia and Longhorn where Morgan was working, and we were talking about it. And I said, I understand why there was a 10-minute wait and why it takes a certain length. And at one point, somebody came up with someone else's food when we were at Longhorn, and they started putting it down. And I said, well, hold it. No one ordered this food. I think you have the different tables food. And I pointed that out. And they were nice about it. And I commiserated with Morgan. He talked about how he had a health scare in the last year, and how he's working in an industry where he can make a lot of money and things like that. But unfortunately, he doesn't have any health care. He doesn't have health care at the time. So he had some health emergency, and he had a $27,000 medical bill. We were stuck at the emergency room. So this, that just fills in the part that, they're going through the same thing you are. Just because someone's working at a restaurant, things like that, people think no one wants to be working. Yeah, they want to be working. It's just harder right now. And a lot of people are under stress. And a lot of people are quitting and going to other jobs. And they're looking for benefits, because it's not all about pay. The nice thing about restaurants right now, you have the volume. And I'll move off that commiseration part with the restaurant. But as a worker at a restaurant, it's really nice to be earning a little more than you did before. But there's still a reminder, because of the pandemic, that people are reminded that how precarious their financial well-being is if you don't have health care, you could be hit with some really not healthy to you, but big bills, huge bills, like buying a new auto bill. At the end of the day, you don't have anything to show for it other than hopefully good health. But we expect people to, accept these jobs, work long hours, long hours and stressed under pressure, I do the same thing. And not expect them to get ill and have requirements like that. If you get ill in the restaurant business, you don't show up, you don't get paid that day. And it's hard to, a lot of what happens with restaurant people, if they do not have, let's say, one of these plans that were offered, the Obamacare plans, if they don't have that, they don't have access to health care. They got to do home remedies, and they're not making money, and then they're under stress a little more, being sick. And people have to, so it leads people that work in the business to feel the need to go in when they're not feeling well. Because they tell people, if you're not feeling well, stay away. There are people that don't want to go into work because they have a job and they make a decent amount of money, and maybe their overhead isn't that much. They're sharing rent, and they want to have a good time. Now, because of the pandemic, there are people that are willing to, that willingly don't go to work, feign illness, and don't come into work and decide that they can come in, have an unexcused absence from work. And they do, because restaurants and certain businesses are under stress for needing the employee. So they're willing to accept things they wouldn't accept before. So that puts a stress on the remaining employees. It's just horrible. I mean, you could be making some money, and because people say, what are you complaining about? You're in a tip job. There's more people. There's less workers. You should be making more. Ideally, that would be the case, wouldn't it? Ideally, the more people you have, the more money you make. Yes, it's a facile argument because there's a law of diminishing returns. And let me explain this to you. When a restaurant is running smoothly, when it's properly staffed, and you have an adequate number of people, the problem with a lot of restaurants, unless you're real fine dining, it's really cyclical. So restaurants don't naturally staff for the busiest they can be. They staff, let's say, at a place at a big shopping center or where sporting events. When there's a big sporting event, it's a big night, they may staff for it. Otherwise, they staff for a certain amount of people and hope that their staff is able to handle if it gets too busy, and they start cutting people if it's too slow. So that's the way the restaurants are. Well, right now they've been busy with not having the staff, and they're expecting people to say, hey, listen, I can work you doubles 7 days a week. Well, people can't handle doubles 7 days a week. Most people can't handle doubles 7 days a week. Let me correct that. There's some people going there. I did it. And I did do it a couple times where I worked, clocked in for 100 hours 1 week, 99.5 in the catering business. Now, that was catering, distinctly different than a la carte restaurants where you're taking the order and running back and forth. There's a lot of stress that goes on. So, I mentioned how staffing goes. So now with the reduced staffing, restaurants are going with what they have. Not what they want, what they have. And they're finding sometimes that maybe they're making more money because they had to increase, the restaurants themselves could be making a little more money. Because they're not staffing that much. What happening is they're getting diminishing returns too. I mentioned that the redistribution of profits when you have these online delivery apps, portion of your profit goes to the service that you do. You got to pay maybe anywhere from 10 to 20% as a restaurant for that entree to be delivered. It's one of the agreements they have. So that's 10 to 20 to 30, I think it's 10 to 20% pretty much. And that 10 to 20% is taken from their profit. And then there's, for a lot of restaurants, they don't pay people extra for preparing to-go orders. They just retask people. And when you're retasking someone, you don't do it with the knowledge that they're going to be making more money. You're doing it just because you have somebody to do it. They don't really, in the long run, they do kind of care that the person's making money, but their job is to get that food out. That's all they're caring about. And at some of these smaller restaurants, they just can't handle the that added, to go. We're doing a lot more to-go orders at the restaurant we work at, more to-go orders than I've ever recalled doing. We used to have maybe 3-4 big to-go orders a night. Now we have, on a weekend, we may have like 12, significantly more. So all this that goes on, the busier you are, the busier kitchen, the longer people are sitting, the longer they wait for the drinks. In their head, people are just thinking about, wow, this is taking so fucking long. This is not right. I want my food now. We got places to go. They're not concerned about it. The people sitting down there, they're not concerned about your staffing levels. They've never worked in restaurants. And if they did, they forgot and don't care. Because people want what they want when they want it. Just like if they're waiting to get on the plane and there's a problem with the plane, we can't take off because there is a backup. A backup on, the main runway where people were taking off. And they said it could be like 15 minutes, 20 minutes because they got extra planes coming down, extra planes leaving because they got sent from another airport. So people say, well, I don't give a shit. I got to catch this flight some other place. So they totally ignore it. And it goes down the blame goes down the line. So at restaurants, when things wait, people get unhappy and stuff like that, the best way they can express their discontent is this in the final process they have with that restaurant, the final interchange. And the final interchange is payment for goods and services. And that tip is the big leeway. Meaning, I was really unhappy with my wait. So you could be a restaurant, you could be a worker, a server at a restaurant, a nice restaurant. And let's say they just seat everyone. But the kitchen can only handle, let's say, 50% of what you're doing right now. So everything gets longer and longer and longer. And the server's running the tables. And the bartender's making drinks. And the server's behind getting the drinks, behind taking the orders, behind the orders are slow coming up. And the people get less and less. So there is a way when it's super busy, you actually start making less per person, so much more that I remember on some of the busiest nights we've had were just okay in tips. And considering the amount of people we had, it was horrible. It was horrible in tips because people start taking it out on the people that are most affected by it. So the harder you work, sometimes you get diminishing returns. Meaning, you some of the nights, my best nights were smaller groups that are generally bigger tippers. I know it would be nice if everyone tipped 25% and everyone was patient and things like that. But in a restaurant that doesn't control their seating, when I say control their seating, they won't seat people unless they can be served. And they said, well, listen, so-and-so has 4 tables, all right. Right now, that's it. They got 16 people. That's all they can handle. Pretty much average, a lot of restaurants, if they're, if it's drinking stuff like that, 16 people is a lot to handle at one time. I remember when I was working in a finer dining, I was doing serving. I had about 50 during a night, 50 or 60. And that's pretty busy. That's pretty busy. And you always think, that's $10 a person. No, but not everyone does that. And the busier it gets, the less you get per person. That's it. And people don't realize that. And when people don't realize it, they have a tendency to disregard that person that's working so hard, and they feel slighted. And they're already under pressure. They're exhausted. And they said, shit, I used to make this kind of money before serving less people. What's going on? So that's what we're dealing right now with the restaurant business. Let's move on. So another thing that I thought about during my travels was we had to go and take care of our business, but also I was going to see my father and my stepmother and then my siblings. Fortunately, they were all in one town, my siblings. Not my father and my stepmother. They were in Dover, Delaware. My siblings are all in Towson. Yeah, Towson, Maryland. Jim, you're from Philadelphia. What are you doing in Towson? Well, my brother moved there years ago. God, had to be 34 years, 34, around 34, 35 years ago. And then everyone started moving in because Towson has this kind of feel. It has it's a university town. It has Towson University, which has grown so much, twice its size now. I don't know if it's they have an online component now, I think, too. But it's turning into a big school comparatively to what it was before. It's huge, comparatively. It's probably grown by at least 100%, if not more, by the amount of buildings I've seen there. I lived there. I lived in Towson back in 2001 and 2 and 3, part of 2003. And it is so different. And I don't know if I necessarily want to live there anymore. Not because it's not a fun town. I still like fun towns. I'd probably be... not because there's a lot of college students and stuff like that. It's just that when you're around so many... You feel so much older. Let's say if you're a heavy person, if you're surrounded by thin people, you feel heavier. Okay. When you're surrounded by a lot of college students and you're in your late 50s, you feel a bit older. So I like a demographically more diverse. I don't necessarily enjoy a town where everyone is my age. But then again, I don't like it where it's leaning too much to the early part. But I do appreciate that youth, how we value youth, and how it's been that way for years. Years and years, generations and generations. Ponce de Leon with the Fountain of Youth, whatever. How plastic surgery, how everyone in Hollywood, is dreading the idea of going, not everyone, but a lot of people are dreading the idea of aging and showing the signs of outward aging. And just the amount of activities people have, how older people mimic younger people. You don't see it versely. You see very young people, preteens, mimic older people, playing doctor and stuff like that. And then when they get to be teenagers in college and things like that, older people try to mimic younger people, the older people that want to show hey, I still got it. I still got it. I mean, I was on a cruise with my family one time, and we're with my oldest niece, Kelly. She and I were, at the time I was drinking, and this wasn't that long ago. This was maybe 6 years ago. Six years ago. And they were doing some kind of scavenger hunt contest on the cruise ship in the main showroom where they do all their big Hollywood, the shows they have. And one of them was the first person that would dive on the floor and do the worm, and I dove on the floor. The result of diving on the floor would be breaking a rib, which I had to deal with for like 3 months. I had a hard time breathing after that. Man, it was tough teaching a spin class with a broken rib. I did do it because, once again, I work in the service industry, case in point. But what that proves, that Peter Pan thing, when I'm thinking about it, it wasn't necessarily the act of growing old and physically manifesting age-related problems. But it's the process of moving out of childhood where your concerns are. And everyone has to deal with that, whether it's teenagers that are going to high school. They're in their transition mode. And they're going to, with their opposite sex or whoever they're romantically involved in, things like that. And they start just adding more responsibilities. First, you have a responsibility to your friends. You have a responsibility to your boyfriend, girlfriend. Schoolwork. And then once you go progress through college and things like that, you got to worry about career, job, student loan. But the main thing that I really saw a change in, and I really do now that I'm in the older demographic, was a change in your relationship with your family. Not so much with parents. Because you know what's so funny and it's so kind of static a lot of times? Is your relationship with your parents doesn't change drastically as you age. The concerns your parents have for you change. Like they say, oh my God, I hope they take care of their health. Their age-related problems. When they're younger, parents worry about the kids. Oh, I hope they don't do anything stupid affecting their health. And that could stay on as an older adult because of the way people drink and the way their weight problems are and how inactive they are. But when it comes to the way you deal with your siblings and how you feel about your siblings and how you develop, because when you're younger, there's all sorts of personality interchanges between siblings, right? Someone could be like a real troublemaker kid, wild child, a little, fly off the handle, bad anger problems, things like that. Other ones can be kind of warm and charming. Others can be just silly. But you deal with that as a kid and you kind of accept it. If you have a horrible relationship with your sibling as a kid, that, I don't know what that turns out with, but I didn't have any horrible relationships with my siblings when I was a kid. I had pretty good relationships with and then, there's still a little stress when you get into the teens, depending on where your motivations are. My sister was in high school was more of a party girl. I was more of a studious fellow. I had come out of middle school, 8th grade, where I was one to drink in the woods, and smoke a little pot and things like that. And I kind of buckled down in the high school years, then to pick it up again in college. My brother was in between, more of a good kid, going through high school and college. Me, I kind of mellowed out during the high school years, and then I went kind of really off the tracks afterwards. But personality-wise, it's interesting how just growing, the process of growing, how people change, how their views are. Like when you're younger, you'd share many of the same views when it comes to religion, your school, the way your people interact with your family. You're more loyal to your family, your brothers and sisters. If I ever got in trouble, my little brother would come running. We'd get involved, and me with him. If anybody was bothering my little brother, I would be. Peggy, not so much. We didn't hang out with as closely as we did when she went into her teens. She went more of on her own, but we were close. And then coming out of that childhood as young adults, you start reminiscing about your childhood and how close you were as you start growing apart. You're reminiscing about a point in life where it was much simpler, and as you get older, your views start to get more sophisticated on, let's say, religion. Let me pause this. I'll be right back in one moment. Let's take this phone call. Hey, we're talking to a scam call. Hello? Hello?
Thanks for calling Social Security Administration. How may I help you?
You called me.
So have you received any kind of case ID number, any reference ID number when you get this call?
No.
In that case, can you verify me your name and your zip code so I can pull out your case file for you?
Well, you called me, so you should know. So, is this?
I know each and everything, but what happens, we have to confirm from your end, right? Whether I'm talking with the right person or not. Alright?
Well, my name is
Did you confirm your name?
Brian Fellows. My name is Brian Fellows.
Brian Fellow?
Fellows. Brian Fellows.
Fellow. What's the zip code?
9154.
9154?
Yep.
That's the only 4-digit zip code?
No, 095. Yeah.
That's me. And tell me, sir, which city you are from?
I'm from Odenton, Maryland. Originally.
Okay.
Oh, well, there's nice. It started out a federal agent will contact. See, I love this stuff. Brian Fellows. That was from Saturday Night Live. So whenever I get the chance, I like to fuck with those people because they're fucking with us. If you get a scam phone call, please don't give your social security number to anybody or your correct phone number or address. When someone's calling you, they should know who you are. Okay? When someone is calling you, they should know who you are. And then the government would not be contacting you by phone. They'd be sending you a certified letter. Okay, what we're talking about is growing up as a child. That was kind of childlike, I guess. It's interesting how they do this all out of India, and they try to set up a thing where they can get your phone number and scam you for like $200, $300, $400, $500. I don't know how much money they were going to ask for. Your case will be transferred. Screw. Yeah. Sure. So, as a child, you're so close to, and you're coming into your adulthood. You have these tight bonds with your siblings, brothers and sisters. But as you get older, you start changing. Sometimes they start changing, and more recently, we've gotten really divisive, especially in my family, in politics. And it used to be that way. It was that way for about 20 years, maybe, for with my sister. She got a little more conservative. I was, I guess, more progressive, and my brother was more moderate. And my youngest sister, was more moderate also. And the other sister started going further afield from it. And she listens to her own news sources, and she believes everything she believes is 100% correct, and what we're doing is incorrect. And that is just like anybody else. It's just like one of these true believers. There wouldn't be a religion out there if everyone had to acquiesce. It used to be science was agreed upon. It used, if the weather turns out good today, I think I might be talking to someone who is a he's not a very big believer in the round earth. He's a flat earther. But when you get older, and then just the character of your relationships change. Like whenever one of the people in your group decides to go off the beaten path, whether they decide to join let's say a person joins a religious group and it happens to a lot of people, they become a fundamentalist Muslim, a fundamentalist Christian, a fundamentalist Jew, a radical atheist. But a radical atheist really doesn't, they just reject everything like that. I can't imagine, they don't try to make you, well, I guess they just shit on your own belief system, just like these other groups do too. Because they're absolutely right. Right? They're absolutely right. Whether you're a fundamentalist Muslim, Christian, or Jew, in their head, there's no lack of certainty. And the same thing goes for these people that are following their alternate news, their alternate facts. And that's what I think now they call them facts in their head. It's a fact. It's a fact. Lizard people control the planet. It's a fact. The world is flat. Could you show me some pictures or some of your, scientific evidence that the world is flat? Maybe some pictures from the edge. If there are giant ice mountains holding the oceans back, can you just, there had to be someone out there that went up and climbed them to see if what's on the other side. And where are we suspended in? Are we in a big empty room? That's the universe. To them, it's just a big empty room with a flat earth in the middle and the rest of it's light all around. Things like that. So when it's a family member, though, that you're disagreeing with, the fundamentals of the world around you, just the basis for what is true and what is not true, and what is hateful and what is not hateful, you start separating. Because at the core of their belief system is a distrust of everything. You don't believe in what they believe in. Like, where I may have some doubts, they're absolutely certain. And they just say, come on to the side. That's all they have to do. All you have to do is come on the side, but reject all the science, all the alternative beliefs out there. Believe that your enemy is 100% evil, that they're pedophilias, and they drink children's blood. So, I mean, it just seems that Peter Pan model, where people long for becoming it's not about having to go to work. It's not about dealing with relationships. It's dealing with the other things as an adult, that how people change when they get older. How they change when they get older. When they're younger, there's more possibilities. There's more doubt. Remember the older people in Peter Pan, they couldn't fly, but younger people could fly because, you just believe it. And so you could probably say, hey, they were screwed up, those kids that believe Peter Pan. You can't fly. Well, in their world, they could. So there was more possibilities, more options. And as you get older, think of it. There were good people in Peter Pan. There was good older people and bad older people. The parents of Wendy and the boys, they were good people. And then you had Captain Hook. He was a grown-up. He wasn't a good person. It was just cut and dry. And they saw it right away. But in our modern lives, as adults, an adult in the Peter Pan world would say, well, Captain Hook isn't that, he was just misinformed. Captain Hook. And those kids he was after, he had a legitimate beef. And he was wronged. And Peter Pan's he's a radical leftist. So no, but it's sad, that part where people get so entrenched in their beliefs that they can demonize their siblings and the people you care about. It's broken up so many families recently. It's doing a number on mine. And I won't necessarily point out who it is, but it's sad when you can't get everyone together as they get older. Their feelings get a little more entrenched. Mine have. But I'm somewhat, I can have doubt and still believe what I believe and admit to doubt. If you can't admit to doubt, then you might have, if you have to be certain about stuff, and you can be certain about some things, about the sun rising in the east and setting in the west, and it being somewhat warmer in the summer than it is in the winter, but who knows what's going to happen. But to be certain about opinions, about things you can't be sure of, and allow those things, the things you can't be sure of, that you're certain of, become the things that separate you from the people that you should be closest with, well, that's a tragedy. And it's sad. If people could just lay it down for a whole conversation. I had a wonderful visit with some friends a couple weeks ago from Philadelphia. We disagree politically. Seriously, politically. But we don't let that come between it, because whether or not there's enough doubt in our belief systems that they say that doesn't mean you're not a good person. I realize that. I have friends, people I care about, that don't necessarily believe what I believe in. It's a shame that they may be hanging on to some kind of, let's say, negative-driven belief system, trying to negate everything, and to point out, well, you're in the cancel culture and whatever, things like that. But I have my doubts, but I am certain of one thing, that when you really shut out someone that knew you when you were young and cared about you when you're young, still cares about you now, for a belief system that some demagogue tells you is the right thing. And you're not out there, and a lot of the people I know are only exposed to that echo chamber where they hear, hate, 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 lie, 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 fib, fib, fib. Fib and, fibs, lies, falsehoods, dog whistles, whatever you want to call it. It's just, you're just giving up the best part of your lives, the part you were given. Your family was given to you. Your family was a gift. And if you choose to throw that away because of your belief system, and you choose to let it encroach itself into your conversations with your loved ones, you want to show your passion for your beliefs, but what about your passion for the way you care for your family? How could you disown somebody for their belief system and stuff like that? And how could you be so hateful to them? How could you call a family member a communist and a Nazi, which is diametrically opposed, but they're both, like I said, a radical communist and a radical Nazi, whether Pol Pot kind of communist or a Nazi, they're all extremist to me. I hate to say it. There are autocratic people that aren't that bad, aren't Nazi-like, and there's people that have socialist tendencies that aren't as bad as extreme communists. It's just what would you call it? It's more of a spectrum where most people are in the middle and they understand what's most important. And if you're going to give up your family for a system of beliefs that you think, some arbitrary belief system that presupposes that immigrants are bad, that anybody that disagrees with you is evil, and that you're the true American and the rest of them are fake, then you've already gone that rabbit hole too far. I don't know and there's no way they voluntarily go back once they go down that rabbit hole. They're there. They accepted it. They accepted that whole thing, and they're, fortunately, if for you as a person, I hope that I hate when some people buy into that belief system, but at least I hope a couple of your family members buy into that belief system so you're not alone. But once you buy into that, you are going, if the rest of your family does not buy into it, just like anybody, just like if you were in Iran and let's say you have a Muslim family and one of them decided they want to be Catholic, which in Iran is kind of radical if you have one person say, well, I'm going to be Catholic. Besides being maybe thrown in jail or whatever, stuff like that, you might be ostracized by your family. You might be. And it may be a poor example, but that is similar when you choose an ideology that excludes other people. Okay. Well, this is Jim the Keys Partner. Not very happy, but it is something I wanted to think about and talk about. And I just wish we could go back to something like that. I do like to thank all my listeners, especially whoever is in Riverton, New Jersey, whether it's some important people in my life live in that area. There was Eileen. There's a Carol. But what happened when I mentioned these towns is when that's where the downloads come from. And I did notice there was a lot of downloads from Riverton. And I do appreciate that. And whoever it is, please send me an email to jim@keysbartender.com. Tell me what you think. And if you are from another town someplace else, I notice I still have a lot of people from Taiwan going. I do appreciate it. And they're from all over for some reason. I do appreciate Taiwan. And India. Not so much from India anymore, but I was wondering if that was just downloads going on. But I do appreciate sharing that with your friends in India. And I wasn't, that scam call that I was getting, its tendency, it did come from the area around the subcontinent, it sounded like. But that doesn't mean everyone is like that. Obviously, there's places in the United States where they do that. They're not as organized because I think that we may have a little more robust police presence where we would go and, if someone did do those things, I think that we'd be able to track it down more. So a lot of them are from outside the country using, online phone numbers where you can get another line that doesn't originate. We have lines that'll show Miami. That's a phone call that came in. Obviously, the person I was talking to, I don't think that call center was from Miami. I think it was from someplace like Chennai, India, or Mumbai. And thank you for, if one of the callers, if they listen, that's great. If you work in a call center and you're trying to get that, listen, I love putting them on because they couldn't really sue me. They were trying to scam people with the thing. So that'd be great if they go, oh, they put my name on they put my voice on the podcast. And you say, yeah, you did. While you were trying to rip off somebody using a Social Security fraud. But please download as many episodes as you can. Get my ranking up there. The more I have, it just changes just the way I can present the Keys Bartender to you. Thank you very much, and I want to talk to you maybe later today. We'll see. Talk to you later. Bye.